Conservatives reacted to professional athletes striking in response to the shooting of Jacob Blake by attempting to minimize it. One example of that is Jared Kushner, but also Mark Short, who serves as Mike Pence's chief of staff. We're gonna get to his statement in just a second, but I just wanna note that it would be odd for conservatives to not think that this strike is a big deal when you consider that they're already spending money and resources on bot campaigns on Twitter. Let me show you one of those bot campaigns that was tweeted by Molly Knight. She provided evidence showing all of these individuals, well, all of these bots, essentially tweeting the exact same thing. NBA players owe me money. I taken off work to watch you guys play your job, never watching NBA again. Bots are usually not very sophisticated in their grammar or their language, but you guys get the point. So with that said, let's take a listen to Mark Short. Again, he's Pence's chief of staff and what he had to say about the players striking.
Does Vice President Pence support the NBA players' boycott of their season?
Look, I don't know that you're going to see the administration weigh in that one way or the other. In my mind, it's absurd and silly. What you saw from the Professional Basketball Association was a continued acceptance and non-denial or non-speaking out against China's continued abuse. And I'm saying they're continuing to allow NBA players to continue to support China when they've continued to repress people, continue to persecute people for speaking out their minds.
Okay, I understand you're upset about that, but they're upset about Jacob Blake. What happened to Jacob Blake? And so why is that absurd?
If they want to protest, I don't think we care. If the NBA chooses to boycott, they're in a fortunate position, and a lot of their players get millions of dollars in salary each and every year. I've not heard them being offering to give up their salary.
I have a lot to say, but Benjamin, I want to open the floor up to you to respond to that statement.
So there's a dog whistle in that, right? They're trying to appeal to the darker side of conservatives who would be jealous of black men making that kind of money. Let's just cut to that. That's why the message has been pretty consistent across the board from Jared Kushner to even the bots, right? And so there's a disdain that they have towards these millionaire athletes because they don't have those type of lifestyles themselves. But at the end of the day, they actually don't have their money guaranteed. At the end of the day, they lost money last night, right? And at the end of the day, if they weren't prepared for a strike, then some of them could actually be in very precarious positions. So regardless of how much money they made a statement, and I think we should stand behind them.
So that's such a good point, and I'm going to be honest about my own ignorance on this because I'm not really big into the sports world. You mentioned that they lost money last night. Can you explain how that works?
Well, I mean, it obviously depends on their contracts, but some of these guys really are dependent on every single check from every single game, but based on the nature of their contracts. And if they are living a lavish lifestyle, if they get $100,000 per game, I'm just throwing a random number out there, $100,000 per game, and they expect to play those games, well, they probably are not saving. I mean, they're human beings like the rest of us, right? When we start making a lot of money, we don't really plan out and project that money could dry up one day. And so if they made those mistakes and they did not get a check to last night, I mean, of course, the check didn't come last night, right? It's whatever the terms of their contract is. But at the end of the day, some of them don't have the prestigious contracts that the other players have.
I want to read a member comment to give us a little more insight into what Milwaukee has dealt with in the past. So N. Lonsker from our member section, and you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join, writes in and says, a Milwaukee player was tasered and arrested by Milwaukee police last year and is still in a civil rights lawsuit. So if any team was going to lead the charge, Milwaukee would. Proud of my hometown, MKE Bucks. All right, so thank you for reminding us about that. I remember talking about that story last year, and that's a really good point. What I also wanted to mention is how unbelievably disingenuous Republicans, conservatives, anyone in the Trump administration is when they mention human rights violations by China, especially when it's amazing when they bring this up, when they talk about the mistreatment of Uygur Muslims, which by the way, to be sure is true. There's no question. There is terrible treatment toward Uygur Muslims. What other group believes in the terrible treatment of Muslims overall? Republicans, conservatives in this country, especially the Trump administration, who kicked off his term by doing a Muslim ban. Okay, so please spare me the pretend concern for Muslims in China. They also mention how the Chinese government likes to rain terror on anyone who speaks out against them. Oh, you mean kind of like the Trump administration, which sent federal agents to demonstrations in Portland to rain terror on them? Is that what they're talking about? Are they considering that? Of course not. Like their hypocrisy is never ending. And by the way, Ivanka Trump received several patents from China. And immediately after that, Donald Trump and the Trump administration dropped a lawsuit against Huawei, which I think is pretty fascinating as well. So these are all things to keep in mind as we hear from these liars and grifters. And with that said, let's hear from one of the biggest liars in the Trump administration, his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Does the White House support the players and the owners in this case?
Look, I think that the NBA players are very fortunate that they have the financial position where they're able to take a night off from work without having to have the consequences to themselves financially. So they have that luxury, which is great. Look, I think with the NBA, there's a lot of activism, and I think that they've put a lot of slogans out. But I think that what we need to do is turn that from slogans and signals to actual action that's going to solve the problem.
We should obviously address what Kushner said there, but I have to say, like CNBC immediately doing like a split screen with like the stock market. It's like, okay. It's very CNBC. But Ben, what do you think about what Kushner said there?
Yeah, I think Kushner is a pretentious little something because he himself has lived a life of luxury that he did not earn. At least these athletes actually earned the lifestyles and the income and the revenues that they get from their labor versus inheritance and capital gains. And so for Jared Kushner to say this again, he's trying to appeal to that side of conservatives that are envious and quite frankly jealous of these black men, predominantly black men, who are going to make these kind of dollars. And then they're trying to invalidate, obviously, the significance of their contribution or their sacrifice. And it's going to work on conservatives because all conservatives need is a talking point to cling to. If they could just get a simple talking point, even if it's disingenuous to cling to, they'll run with it.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond the envy regarding their financial success. I think it's also about feeling angry and frustrated about the fact that these players actually have power and they know they have power and they decided to use it, right? In doing this strike, everyone was discussing it. Everyone was listening to what they had to say. You also have to keep in mind that by doing a strike, these are professional athletes who are idolized by so many people, and it could inspire more strikes. So I think that there's a certain level of fear that they're trying to, cover up. But I think they're doing a poor job in trying to do that. So I also want to read a few excerpts from Bhaskar Sankar's piece in The Guardian, because I think he made a lot of great points that specifically respond to the type of criticism that we're hearing from conservatives about these professional athletes. He writes about 75% of the NBA is black, and many of its athletes come from poor and working class backgrounds. They may have become millionaires in their 20s, but many still identify with those facing the brunt of violence and neglect. As the Toronto Raptors' Fred VanVleet said on Wednesday, we're the oppressed ones, and the responsibility falls on us to make a change to stop being oppressed. NBA players might not be ordinary workers, but they have far more in common with the working class communities that nurtured so many of them in childhood than with the billionaire owners they now work for. What's more, to make change, just like all workers, they have to organize collectively. And finally, he writes, disruptive action costs the NBA advertisement dollars. This is where the power comes in, and potentially polarized fans. There will be every attempt to control the league's ongoing rank and file rebellion and to neuter its development. So I thought that was a really powerful piece. And full disclosure, I work with Bhaskar Sankar at Jacobin, but I think that he was spot on in this particular op-ed that you guys should check out.
Yeah, no, I had to jump in there because that was an excellent piece by Bhaskar. I didn't get a chance to read it in its entirety, but that segment that you read was extremely powerful. I think the most critical part that he said was that we have to recognize that I don't care how much money these guys make, they are still labor. And if their labor is ever cut off, so is their income. And so they do have far more in common with us, even though they may make $1 million a year or $10 million a year. When their labor ends, their revenue and their income stream ends, they are not capitalists. They don't make their money off of capital gains.
Want to win a free electric scooter? Well, our partners at Aspiration and Zoom Electric are making it possible. All you have to do is head to tyt.com/greensummer for your chance to win.